Why would the most powerful warship in the world be the worst job in the Navy? Not the hardest, not the most dangerous, the worst in the only sense that mattered to the man standing on her quarterdeck, with his whole career and his whole fortune still in front of him. Command of the biggest ship in the fleet was the visible summit of the profession, the thing every officer was raised to want, and taking it could quietly ruin him. Meanwhile, a smaller, lighter, far less impressive ship, one that a real warship could have sunk in an afternoon, was the fastest route to serious wealth anywhere in the entire service. By the time these accounts are closed, you are going to understand exactly why. So hold on to the question the whole way down. How does the finest ship in the Navy end up being the worst posting in it? Start with what you have actually been handed this morning, because it's stranger than it looks. You are a captain in the Royal Navy in the long war years around the turn of the 19th century. Today, you were given a ship, not sold one, given one, a frigate, a lean, fast-sailing warship with her guns on a single covered deck, a few hundred tons of oak and canvas, storerooms packed, and a crew of 200 men and more already aboard and waiting for you. You did not pay for the hull. You did not pay for the guns, or the powder, or one single day of any sailor's wages. The Crown paid for all of it. The Crown still owns every plank of it. Read that again because it breaks the rule this whole channel runs on. You are the operator of an enormous floating fortune, and you own absolutely none of it. So what is yours? Your pay, and your pay is fine, steady, respectable, and completely incapable of making you rich. Officers living on that salary did not buy estates. They did not come ashore into country houses with parks around them. And yet the history of this Navy is stuffed with captains who did exactly that. Men who went to sea with nothing and returned a few years later rich enough to buy land and influence and seats in Parliament. That money came from somewhere, and it did not come from the paymaster. So if the ship isn't yours, and the wages can't do it, what exactly is the asset you are operating? Here is the answer, and everything else in this video hangs off it. You do not get rich by owning your ship. You get rich by taking somebody else's. In this war, an enemy vessel captured at sea did not simply become a trophy to be admired. It became property. The hull, the guns, the rigging, and every ton of cargo down in the hold, all of it legally transferable, all of it sellable. And the state, instead of quietly keeping that value for itself, handed the great bulk of it back to the men who took it. Run down a merchantman heavy with sugar, and you have not won a skirmish. You have seized an inventory. The Navy called that money prize, and prize was the engine underneath every ambition in the service. Now look at the shape of that arrangement as a business, because it is genuinely remarkable. Someone else buys the ship. Someone else arms it. Someone else feeds and pays the 200 men who work it and repairs it when the sea breaks it. You put in no capital. You carry no debt. You cannot be bankrupted by losing the vessel because the vessel was never on your books to begin with. And yet, a very large share of anything that vessel earns lands in your hands. Every shipowner in this whole maritime series would have wept for terms like these. You have found the only business at sea in your century with unlimited upside and no capital at risk. Which makes the obvious question louder. If this machine is so perfect, why isn't every captain in the fleet rich?
Because the machine only runs in certain waters, in certain ships. And this is where your unglamorous little frigate starts to matter. Prizes are not taken in great battles. Battles are rare, and the ships that fight them are warships, which carry gunpowder and biscuit rather than anything worth selling in a market. Prizes are taken in the long, dull, patient business of cruising, alone on a station, week after week, sitting off a headland or a trade route where enemy merchant traffic has no choice but to pass. For that, you need speed, to run a chase down before dark. You need to be able to work in close along a coast. Above all, you need to be independent, Nobody's seen you're standing at your shoulder deciding where you sail tomorrow. A frigate is the precise instrument for that job. Fast enough to catch almost anything she cannot fight, strong enough to fight almost anything she cannot outrun, and modest enough that the Admiralty is perfectly happy to send her off alone for months at a time. Which means that in commercial terms, your little ship is a hunting vessel with a license and no landlord, and every officer in the Navy understood it. Frigate commands were fought over, begged for, angled at through every family connection a man could find. So look at the other end of the fleet. If a frigate is the money machine, what on earth is the biggest warship in the world? Stay with me here, because the answer is the trap the title warned you about. A ship of the line was the heaviest object afloat in that age. Tiers of gun decks stacked one above another, the better part of 1,000 men, more concentrated destructive power than anything else humanity had built. Commanding one was the visible peak of the profession, the portrait, the reputation, the thing they carve on your memorial. It was also, financially, close to a dead end. Ships of the line were not sent off cruising after merchantmen. They were kept together in squadrons, and squadrons spent the war doing the single least profitable thing a warship can do: blockade. Months on end, anchored off an enemy port in filthy weather, watching, waiting, grinding down the ship and the men. Nothing to chase, nothing coming out, which was, after all, the entire point of being there. And the arithmetic of the fleet made it worse. When you are one ship among 30, anything taken is not taken by you. It is taken by the squadron and shared through the squadron. The bigger and grander your command, the more company you keep, and the more hands the same money must pass through before any of it reaches yours. So the officer standing on the finest quarterdeck in the Navy, in command of more firepower than any man afloat, spends the war watching some young captain in a small, fast ship he could have sunk in 10 minutes come home wealthy. That is the paradox in the title, and it is entirely real. But it is not yet the whole of it, because there was a rule about who counted as being there, and it was about to make things much stranger.
Slow right down for this one, because it changed the way men actually sailed their ships. The share of a prize did not go only to the vessel that fired the shot. It went to every ship in sight at the moment of capture. In sight. Not helping, not chasing, not even necessarily aware of what was happening, simply visible on the horizon. A friendly topsail lifting over the edge of the world 5 miles off, and that complete stranger has just become your business partner, entitled to cut into money you were in the middle of earning. The rule existed for a decent enough reason. A distant sail can frighten an enemy into striking his colors without a fight, and the law preferred a rough, predictable fairness to endless argument about who had really done the work. But look at what it does to the man on the quarterdeck. The most profitable maneuver available to a Royal Navy captain was very often to make quite sure that nobody could see him. Ships worked to stay alone. Captains hung back from their own consorts, drifted wide of the squadron, volunteered for the far edge of a sweep, and when a fat merchantman finally lifted over the horizon, the calculation running behind the eyes on that deck was not only, how do I take her, but who else on this ocean can watch me do it? The Navy had built a payment system that quietly paid its own officers to keep away from each other. And all of that is still only the money you might earn. We have not yet touched what happened once you actually had the ship. Because here is the part almost nobody tells you, and it is the reason this business was never as good as it looked from the deck. The moment you take an enemy ship, you have not been paid. You have not even been promised. What you are holding is a claim. That vessel and everything inside it has to be sailed into a friendly port, handed over, and put in front of a court, a prize court, whose entire job is to decide whether your capture was lawful in the first place. Was she genuinely enemy property? Was that cargo neutral goods traveling under an enemy flag? Were the papers in order, and were they real? Until a judge condemns her as good prize, not one coin of that fortune exists. And the process was not quick. Claims crawled across oceans in wartime, through courts sitting in places you would never see. Men waited years. Men died waiting. And the ship still had to get there. A captured vessel had to be manned by your own people. A prize crew pulled out of your own thinning ship's company and sent off across hostile water in a damaged hull they had never sailed before. If the enemy retook her on the way, she was gone. If she foundered, she was gone. If she wrecked making the harbor mouth, she was gone. Every prize you took made your own ship weaker and your own claim less certain, and you went out and took the next one anyway. Then the claim leaked the whole way down. There were court fees. There were the lawyers arguing your case and the owners on the other side arguing back. And there was the prize agent, the man ashore who handled your paperwork, chased the court, and collected the money on your behalf, who took his cut of everything he touched, and who was the one person in this entire story paid whether your case went well or badly. So the true shape of the business finally shows itself. You did not capture wealth. You captured a lawsuit with a ship attached to it, and then you stood in a queue.
And when the money did finally arrive, it did not arrive evenly. The division of a prize was fixed in advance, by proclamation, not by negotiation, set shares laid out by rank, from the officer in command at the top down to the seaman at the bottom. And it was not laid out gently. A captain's portion of one successful capture could be worth many years of his salary at a stroke. The share reaching an ordinary seaman, split across hundreds of men, could come to remarkably little, sometimes so little and so slowly that sailors sold their claims off cheap to speculators ashore rather than wait years for a court they would never see to rule on a ship they had bled for. The same capture, the same night's work, the same broadside that could have killed any of them, and the ledger recorded it as two completely different events depending on where a man had been standing on that deck. Then add the last name on the list, and it is the one that stings. A portion of prizes taken by the ships on a station went to the flag officer commanding it, the admiral. Not the admiral who fought, the admiral whose name was on the station. He could be 100 miles away, at anchor, asleep, and a slice of the money you spent 3 weeks in a running gun action to earn was already his by right of position alone. If that pattern feels familiar, it should. It is the same machine we found under the East Indiaman. The man standing furthest from the risk, holding the safest income in the system. So let's close the accounts, the way a captain has to when the war finally ends. Was this a good business? Structurally, it was extraordinary. No capital at risk, no debt, an asset worth a fortune supplied, armed, crewed, and repaired by somebody else, and a legal right to a large share of everything that asset could seize. Nothing in the merchant world came close to those terms. But every single one of those advantages arrived with the same string attached. You controlled none of it. You did not choose your ship, so you did not choose whether you were handed the hunter or the blockading giant. You did not control who was in sight. You did not control the court, or the agent, or the delay, or the admiral's portion. Your income was never earned in the way a merchant earns. It was awarded by other people, elsewhere, later. Which is exactly why the biggest warship in the Navy really was the worst job. Not because she was a bad ship, because she put you in the one place in the fleet where this machine could not run. No independent cruising, no empty horizon, no merchantman to take, and 30 other ships watching on the rare day there was. The whole service was a lottery in which the state generously paid for every ticket, and being promoted to the grandest command in it meant being handed the one ticket that could not win. Every ambitious officer in that Navy wanted glory and wanted money. The fleet was arranged, almost perfectly, so that the two came from different ships. If you have never thought about a warship as a financial instrument before, this is the sort of thing we do here. We open the account books of the past and look at who was actually being paid and who only looked like they were. Subscribe and take your seat at the table.
This is Owning History, where history opens its account books.